Hello and welcome to this UniTaster On Demand event today. My name is John Cheek. I'm here from UniTasterDays, and it's my job to introduce the event and introduce the speaker. The subject we're going to be looking at today is social science, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Karl Mason from Royal Holloway, University of London. With these events, we like to cover why you might be interested in studying the course, in this case, obviously social science, what to expect on it if you do study it, some application tips and careers. But with that, always conscious you've tuned in to hear from my speaker, not for myself. I'll pass things over to Karl Mason, joining us from Royal Holloway, University of London.
Thanks for having me along today to talk about social science. As you said, my name is Karl Mason, and I'm a lecturer and programme lead for the Bachelor in Social Science at Royal Holloway, University of London. So to begin, I think it might be helpful just to say why I studied social science at university. As a young person, I was very aware of the world around me. I grew up in a city. I was aware of things like homelessness, urban poverty, and I was very interested in sort of the environment, climate change, things like that. And it's those sorts of things that drew me to think about, society and the world around me. And that's what drew me to study social science. As it turned out, after my social science degree, I trained as a social worker and worked with children in a hospital and in homelessness services before joining Royal Holloway and lecturing and teaching in social science. But I still volunteer in homelessness services as well. So that's just a little taster. But I'll take you through this set of slides, and hopefully it'll give you some insight into what social science is and why you might consider applying for it, and what your career pathway might look like. So social science is essentially the study of society and social issues, but it drills down to how society is organized and asks questions such as, how do we play a role in shaping the world around us? But also, how are we shaped by the world around us? How do things like class, race, gender, sexuality and gender identity, or disability and other characteristics like that, how do they impact on us and our experience of the world? Equally, how do things like government policy or law impact on us and how we experience the world? So essentially, it's about looking at society and social issues in the round and thinking about their impact on people. And it provides explanations and theories for how society works. Social science is sort of an umbrella because it houses and integrates a range of different areas of study, or what we call social science disciplines. So some people will be aware of or may have studied at A-level things like sociology, politics, but there are other disciplines within social science like criminology, economics, and social policy. And you can expect to have modules from most of these, if not all of these, in a social science degree. So it's a really nice way of integrating these different areas. Perhaps you've got an interest in sociology, but you're also interested in politics or criminology. And so this is a nice way of integrating modules across these areas. So for example, you might be looking at modules, but also areas of interest on the degree course that consider issues such as those that I've put up on the screen, things like poverty, inequality, and welfare, things like gender identity and sexuality, political questions like how and why people vote. What about crimes of the powerful, white-collar crime, how that is differentiated from blue-collar crime, for example? What about areas of policy such as housing and homelessness? How do race and racism impact and shape our experience of the world around us? What about things like the role of the voluntary sector? And how do our experiences change over time from childhood through adulthood through to being an older person? what about other political questions around how politics looks in the UK, but also a comparative perspective in relation to jurisdictions outside the West. So these are some of the areas that social science looks at, and you can see that that's quite varied, isn't it? And indeed, these are just examples of some of the areas that you would be potentially covering in your social science degree. Let's give an example of this just to really help you understand how social science can help address contemporary real world issues. So COVID is a very good example, and I've included 3 snippets from a range of different news sources. Because COVID has raised a number of questions that social science can actually help to answer. So, for example, COVID has raised questions around inequality because it's exposed pre-existing inequalities in society, things like inequalities around age and care settings, things like disability and experiences of illness or sickness, things around precarious forms of employment, or issues around race and class, and, for example, overcrowded housing. So social sciences can really help to look at these issues that COVID has raised. COVID has also raised, aside from some of those bigger macro issues, COVID has also impacted on our lives in a more micro way. And social sciences would also be helping to address more day-to-day things like how work is organized, how we socialize, how we use social media, things like travel and tourism, things like how we connect with family and friends, how we go about education and schooling. And it can also help us to think about how we will transition out of COVID. How will this be framed? Will we be returning to normal, or will we be seeing some new and emerging forms of society? And this, I suppose, just demonstrates how important it is for social scientists to be engaging with news and with a variety of news sources in order to stay in touch with what's going on in the world around us. So what can you expect from social sciences? Well, I think it's really important to say that as a social scientist, you'll be engaged in thinking through and researching important contemporary social issues. So you'll be staying in touch with current affairs or watching the news, as I mentioned previously. And you'll be taking modules from a range of different social science areas. So for example, politics, sociology, social policy, economics, and criminology. But some universities will also allow you to take modules from things like philosophy or human geography, for example. And you can expect also to have a good research methods founding through your course. This is often integrated throughout or situated in year 2. And then you would do a dissertation or an independent research study in your final year. You would be expecting to have a variety of different assessment types, from more traditional types of assessment like exams or essays, but also in social sciences, you'd be looking at more creative or group work tasks in terms of really getting to understand how society works and working with teams of students, or going out into the community in order to sort of think about how society works and looking at more creative methods of assessment. In terms of careers, well, first of all, it's important to say that social sciences help you to develop a range of different skills that employers are looking for. So, for example, through your studies, you'll be engaged in looking at research. You'll be critically thinking about that research. You'll be developing skills around evaluating data and digital skills, but also thinking creatively around what you're reading. You'll also be developing soft skills like teamwork, communicating both in writing and and orally and in group work settings. You'll be, I suppose, developing a sense of empathy in relation to the experiences that other people have in relation to the world around them and some of the inequalities that are experienced. And you'll be engaging in, I suppose, a sense of self-reflection around your own positionality in relation to these things. But also you'll be learning some and developing some organizational skills like planning and time management, leadership skills, and also your awareness of the employment sector. So through developing these skills, you then are really prepared for a range of different careers. And graduates in social sciences tend to follow three distinct pathways. So some social science graduates will pursue research roles. So for example, with the Office for National Statistics, or research roles in the voluntary sector. And some will go on to do further study, for example, masters in research, or PhD study, in order to really specialize and do independent research training. Other social science graduates will go into policy roles, for example, in local government or in the civil service. And quite a lot of social science graduates will go down a social care route, and that's the route that I went down after studying social sciences. So, for example, some people will be able to directly enter social care roles from their social science degree. For example, social care roles, community work roles, work in voluntary sector, doing some support work or youth work, and others other people like me will pursue professional qualifications at postgraduate taught level. So this would be qualifications in social work, nursing, or joining the police, for example. And so there's a real variety of roles, and it's not limited to these, because I think what's important to say is that social sciences really instill a sense of, transferable skills. Social science graduates are sought after, and that's because of the versatility of their degree and the integrated nature of their degree. So finally, just to think about tips for applications. I suppose one thing to say is that applications are often at their strongest when they're different. So sometimes following a list of tips can lead to sort of formulaic answers. So I wouldn't want you to do that. But certainly I'd expect to see you demonstrating your interest in social science with engaging examples. And I think that it's useful to say this should be beyond your A-level studies. You can mention if you've studied one of the social science disciplines at the A level, that's helpful. But how have you taken it beyond that? And just note that actually it's important to say that if you haven't studied a social science at A level, that's not a barrier to studying social science at university. Certainly at most universities. And I'd be saying that it's important for you to show your interest in social science in ways that perhaps other people may not have done. So how have you gone that extra mile to show that you're interested in issues in society, for example? Have you been part of clubs? Have you done some work experience? Have you done some reading? Are you watching the news, for example? Have you registered to vote, for example? These sorts of things. And possibly for some people, there'd be personal experience or family background that's relevant to mention. For example, experience of volunteering, experience of particular characteristics, or perhaps your parents' careers that might be relevant, might not. And then also, I think that it's important to mention social issues and current affairs and issues that you're, dare I say, passionate about, and how have you acted on that passion? So are you interested in things like the environment, and what have you done about that? These can be important things to engage in. Overall, the social sciences are a very versatile area, very flexible. There's a range of different career paths, and it's just, a way of, it's a very applied sort of way of thinking about the world, studying the world, and developing, research skills and other skills that help you to see the world in a fresh way. So I hope that you'll consider studying social science, and I hope that this has been useful for you.